Look under the table, sir. The maid's toddler exposed a secret that made the billionaire freeze. A 3-year-old girl pointed under a glass dining table and said one sentence that stopped a billion-dollar wedding. The room went silent. Fork dropped. The bride-to-be's smile cracked for half a second, then came back too fast, too forced. The billionaire looked down at the child, then at the woman he was about to marry in 9 days. Nobody else had noticed what the girl saw. Nobody else had been low enough to see it. Small hand. Small voice. A secret too big for a child to understand, but big enough to end everything. Look under the table, sir, the girl whispered again. And when the billionaire finally looked, his whole world changed. Welcome back, friends, to the channel where real emotions live. Grab your tea, get comfortable, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. This story will break your heart and then heal it. Stay with us until the very end. The Cross Mansion sat on top of a hill in Connecticut, the kind of house that looked like it belonged on a postcard, not somewhere real people lived. Daniel Cross owned it, along with half a dozen companies, 3 private jets, and a reputation for being unshakable. At 45, he had built an empire out of nothing but stubbornness and sleepless nights, and people in business circles spoke his name with a mixture of respect and fear. But inside that mansion, behind the marble floors and the floor-to-ceiling windows, Daniel was tired in a way that money couldn't fix. He had lost his wife 6 years earlier to illness, and ever since, the house had felt like a beautiful, empty box. His assistant managed his calendar. His chef managed his meals. And his housekeeper, a quiet woman named Elena Reyes, managed everything else, including most days, keeping the loneliness from showing on his face. Elena was 34, a single mother who had come to work for the Cross family 2 years earlier after a string of hardships she rarely spoke about. She brought her daughter, Maya, to work with her most days, since daycare was an expense she couldn't always cover, and Daniel had never once complained. In fact, he liked having the girl around. Maya's laughter was the only sound in that house that felt alive. Everything changed the day Daniel introduced Vanessa Cole to the staff. Vanessa was 31, polished, beautiful in the practiced way of someone who had spent years learning exactly how to enter a room. She had met Daniel at a charity gala 8 months earlier, and within weeks she had become a fixture in his life. Within months, she had a ring on her finger. The engagement had moved fast, faster than anyone close to Daniel felt comfortable with, but he brushed off the concerns of his old friends as jealousy or overprotectiveness. He was happy, or at least he told himself he was. From her very first day in the house, Vanessa made it clear that she did not like Elena. "She's just the help, Daniel," Vanessa said one evening, not bothering to lower her voice as Elena folded towels in the next room. "I don't understand why she needs to bring her child here. This isn't a daycare." "Maya's never caused a problem," Daniel said carefully. "Elena's one of the most reliable people on my staff." "Reliable," Vanessa repeated, smiling thinly. "Sure." Elena heard every word, the way she heard most things in that house. Quietly, without reaction, because reacting wasn't a luxury she could afford. She needed the job. Maya needed stability. And she had learned long ago that swallowing her pride was sometimes the price of survival. But Vanessa wasn't finished. 3 weeks before the wedding, during a dinner with Daniel's business partners, Vanessa orchestrated a moment of humiliation that the staff would whisper about for months. Elena had been asked to serve dessert, and as she set a tray down near the head of the table, Maya, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with a coloring book, wandered over to see her mother. "Get your child out of here," Vanessa snapped, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "This is a dinner for important people, not a playground." The table went quiet. Daniel's business partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. Elena's face flushed red as she scooped Maya into her arms and apologized, backing out of the dining room as quickly as she could, her hands shaking. Daniel said nothing in the moment, a hesitation that would haunt him later. He simply watched Elena leave, a strange tightness in his chest that he didn't yet understand. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Daniel found Elena in the kitchen, sitting at the small staff table with Maya asleep against her shoulder. Her eyes were red, though she tried to hide it when she saw him. "I'm sorry about tonight," he said quietly. "That shouldn't have happened." "It's fine, Mr. Cross," Elena said, the way she always did, deflecting instead of accepting. "I'll make sure Maya stays in the back rooms during dinners from now on." "That's not what I meant." She looked up at him then, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding unspoken, that things in that house were shifting in a way neither of them could name yet. Daniel noticed, not for the first time, how exhausted she looked. How careful. How a woman with nothing left to lose still tried so hard not to ask for anything. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught something on the floor near the kitchen entrance, a small folded piece of paper, half hidden under the edge of a rug. He almost ignored it. But something about the careful way it had been tucked there made him pick it up. It was a receipt. A jewelry store receipt, dated 2 weeks earlier, for a piece that Daniel had never purchased and never seen Vanessa wear. The price made his stomach turn, not because of the cost, but because of the buyer's name listed at the bottom. It wasn't Vanessa's name. It was a name he didn't recognize at all. He slid the paper into his pocket, his mind racing, and for the first time since the engagement began, a small, cold seed of doubt took root in his chest. Something was wrong in his house. He just didn't know how wrong yet. The days that followed felt different. Daniel found himself watching Vanessa more closely. The way she stepped out of rooms to take phone calls, the way her smile sometimes arrived a beat too late, as if she had to remind herself to wear it. He told himself he was being paranoid. Grief did strange things to a man's mind, he reasoned. And maybe he was simply afraid of being happy again. But the receipt stayed in his pocket like a stone. Vanessa, meanwhile, had not let go of her dislike for Elena. If anything, it had gotten worse. She began finding small reasons to criticize her. A dish placed wrong, a room not clean to her standard, a tone of voice she claimed was disrespectful. Each complaint chipped away at Elena's composure, though she never fought back. She couldn't. She had Maya to think about. One afternoon, while Daniel was away at a board meeting, Vanessa called Elena into the study. "I think it's time we talked honestly," Vanessa said, leaning against the desk with the practiced calm of someone used to controlling conversations. "Daniel is a busy man. He doesn't need distractions in his home. And I think you know exactly what I mean by that." "I'm not sure I do," Elena said carefully. "I've seen the way he looks at you. The way he lingers when you're in the room." Vanessa's voice was light, almost friendly, which made it worse. "I'm not angry. I just want you to understand your place before this gets complicated for everyone, especially your son." The threat was subtle, wrapped in soft words, but Elena heard it clearly. She left the study with her hands trembling, and that night, for the first time in months, she cried after Maya had fallen asleep. But the universe, it seemed, was not finished revealing its secrets. 2 nights later, Elena was cleaning the East Wing study after hours when she noticed Vanessa's phone light up on the side table, left behind during a hurried exit. A name flashed across the screen, Marcus. A text preview followed. "Don't get nervous now. 9 more days and it's done. Just keep him distracted." Elena's blood went cold. She had no right to look further, and she didn't. She wasn't that kind of person. But the words stayed lodged in her mind for days, refusing to let her rest. Keep him distracted. Distracted from what? Around the same time, Maya began saying strange things, the way young children sometimes repeat what they overhear without understanding its weight. One morning, while Elena dressed her for the day, she tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, the pretty lady talks to a man on the phone. She hides under the stairs." Elena froze. "What man, baby?" Maya shrugged, already losing interest, the way toddlers do. "A man with a deep voice. She tells him secrets. Elena didn't know what to do with the information. She wasn't a detective. She wasn't family. She was a maid trying to survive, and getting involved in the private affairs of a billionaire's engagement felt like a fast way to lose everything. But something gnawed at her, a mother's instinct perhaps, or simple human decency. Daniel had never been anything but kind to her and Maya. He didn't deserve to be lied to, whatever was happening. The clearest sign came a week before the wedding, during a formal dinner with Vanessa's family. Elena was serving the table, Maya quietly playing beneath it with a small toy car. Hidden from sight by the long white tablecloth, the way she often did when she had no one to watch him. From her small hiding place, Maya saw something none of the adults could see from their seats. Vanessa's hand beneath the table, passing a small folded paper to a man seated beside her. A man introduced to the table as her cousin, though something about the exchange looked far too careful, far too rehearsed for family. Maya didn't understand what she saw, but she remembered it. And 3 weeks later, that memory would matter more than anyone could have imagined. By the end of that dinner, Daniel pulled Elena aside in the hallway. His expression unreadable. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," he said quietly. "Have you noticed anything strange about Vanessa? Anything at all?" Elena hesitated. The truth sat heavy in her throat, fighting against every instinct telling her to stay silent, to stay safe. "Mr. Cross," she finally said, "I think there are things in this house that none of us fully understand yet. But I'm afraid of what happens if I'm wrong." Daniel studied her face for a long moment. "And I'm afraid of what happens if you're right," he said. The wedding was now only 9 days away, and the mansion buzzed with preparation. Florists, caterers, a small army of staff transforming the estate's gardens into something out of a fairy tale. Daniel moved through it all like a man underwater, smiling when expected, nodding when spoken to, while the receipt in his pocket and Elena's careful warning sat heavy in his mind. He hired a private investigator quietly, without telling anyone, not even his closest friends. 3 days later, the man returned with a folder that made Daniel's hands shake as he opened it. Vanessa Cole was not who she said she was. Her real name was Vanessa Coletti. 11 years earlier, she had married a wealthy widower in Florida, 26 years her senior, who died of a sudden heart complication 14 months into the marriage, leaving her a multimillion-dollar estate that she liquidated and disappeared from within a year. Before that, under yet another name, she had been engaged, though never married, to an aging tech executive in California who broke off the relationship just weeks before the wedding after a friend warned him about irregularities in her background. The man she'd been calling her cousin was not family at all. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had a record for financial fraud, working as her partner in at least 2 of these earlier schemes. Daniel sat in his study long into the night, the folder open in front of him, feeling something between rage and humiliation churn in his chest. He had let this woman into his home, into his bed, into the fragile, healing parts of his life. He'd only just begun to trust again. But the most damning piece of evidence wasn't in the folder at all. It came the very next evening, during a quiet family dinner Vanessa had insisted on hosting to bond with Daniel before the wedding, an intimate affair with just the 2 of them, Marcus posing again as her cousin, and Elena serving quietly in the background with Maya playing nearby, half hidden beneath the long tablecloth as she so often was. Daniel had grown suspicious enough by now to watch everything closely. The way Vanessa poured his wine herself instead of letting staff do it, the way her eyes kept flicking toward Marcus throughout the meal, the small, tense smiles passed between them. Then Maya's small voice rang out from beneath the table, clear and innocent, cutting straight through the polished conversation like a blade. "Look under the table, sir." Daniel turned. The boy was looking directly at him, pointing toward Vanessa's side of the table. His small face serious in the way only children manage to be when they don't yet understand the weight of truth. "The lady put something in your cup," Maya said simply. "Every time. From her ring. The table went silent. Vanessa's face drained of color. Daniel looked down, really looked, and noticed for the first time the unusual ornate ring on Vanessa's right hand, one she always wore but had never explained, with a small hinged compartment nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. His wine glass sat untouched in front of him. He had been suspicious enough that night not to drink yet. A small, lucky hesitation that may have saved him from something far worse than heartbreak. "What is he talking about, Vanessa?" Daniel asked, his voice dangerously calm. "He's a child," Vanessa said quickly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Children make things up, Daniel, you know that. Take off the ring." "Daniel, take off the ring, Vanessa." The room had never felt so silent. Marcus shifted in his seat, his hand inching toward his jacket pocket, but Daniel's head of security, present at every formal dinner since the investigation began, a precaution Daniel hadn't mentioned to anyone, stepped forward before Marcus could move further. Vanessa's hands trembled as she finally removed the ring and set it on the table. Daniel opened the small hidden compartment himself, revealing a fine white powder inside. Not poison, the toxicology report would later confirm, but a powerful sedative, the kind used to slowly cause confusion, memory lapses, and eventually, with sustained use, serious cardiac strain in a man Daniel's age. Enough, over time, to make a sudden health complication look entirely natural to any doctor unfamiliar with the buildup. It was the same method, the investigator later confirmed, used 11 years earlier on her first husband in Florida. The room erupted into chaos. Shouting, accusations, Marcus attempting to bolt for the door only to be stopped by security. But Daniel barely heard any of it. He was looking at Maya, still sitting quietly beneath the table, looking back up at him with wide, innocent eyes, utterly unaware that he had just saved a man's life. "What would you do?" the narrator might ask, "if a child's innocent eyes saw the truth that every adult in the room had missed? Tell us honestly in the comments. Would you have believed him right away?" Within hours, the mansion that had been preparing for a wedding became the scene of a criminal investigation. Marcus Webb was arrested on the spot, found to be carrying a forged identification and a phone full of messages confirming the plan in chilling detail. Messages about timelines, about finishing it before the wedding, about an offshore account already prepared to receive funds once Daniel's estate was settled. Vanessa was arrested the following morning, her composed mask finally, completely shattered. The press, who had spent months photographing the fairy tale engagement of billionaire Daniel Cross, now scrambled to cover the unraveling scandal instead. Headlines that once read Cross's whirlwind romance became bride to be accused of elaborate poisoning plot. Third time's not the charm. The fallout was swift and total. The Florida authorities reopened the investigation into her first husband's death, this time with fresh evidence and renewed urgency. The California executive she had once been engaged to came forward publicly, admitting he'd always suspected something was wrong but had never had proof. Only the quiet, persistent unease of a man who'd nearly made the same mistake Daniel almost had. Vanessa's modeling and event planning business, much of it built on connections she'd made through Daniel's social circle, collapsed within days as former clients and partners distanced themselves. Friends she'd cultivated for the wedding guest list suddenly had no comment for reporters. The very polish and charm that had carried her into Daniel's life now worked against her. Every interview clip replayed as evidence of practiced manipulation rather than genuine warmth. In the middle of the unraveling, a second twist emerged, one that connected back to the very person who had started it all. Elena was called in for questioning, simply as a witness who had served at the dinners in question, and during her statement, an investigator noticed her surname. "Reyes," he said slowly. "Any relation to Carlos Reyes? Worked construction for the original Cross Holdings development in the 90s. Elena blinked, startled. "That was my father." It turned out that Elena's father had been a foreman on one of Daniel's late father's earliest projects, and more than that, had once loaned the elder Cross a substantial sum during a financial downturn that nearly sank the company before it began, a debt that was recorded but, due to a clerical oversight decades old, never formally repaid before both men passed away. Buried in old company archives, the investigator found the paperwork, a small but real equity stake in early Cross holdings, owed to Carlos Reyes and by inheritance to his daughter. Elena had no idea any of this existed. She had simply needed a job 2 years earlier and had taken one cleaning the house of a man whose family, unknown to either of them, was quietly indebted to hers. When Daniel learned of this, sitting in his study with the old paperwork spread before him, he felt the floor of his world shift again, this time not with betrayal, but with something closer to disbelief, and underneath that, a strange, growing warmth. The woman his fiancé had humiliated, dismissed, and threatened was, in the most unexpected way, owed a debt his own family had never paid. They deserve this, viewers would later say of Vanessa and Marcus, watching justice close in from every direction, legal, financial, and personal, but few would guess the quieter justice still unfolding in Elena's favor, waiting just beneath the surface. 3 weeks later, in a private meeting arranged by lawyers from both sides, Vanessa was made to face Daniel one final time before formal charges proceeded. Out on bail, stripped of the confidence that once seemed unshakable, she looked smaller somehow, the practiced softness in her voice replaced by something brittle and desperate. "I never meant for it to go that far," she said, twisting her hands in her lap. I got in too deep with Marcus's plan and I couldn't see a way out." "You poisoned my wine, Vanessa," Daniel said quietly. "There is no version of that sentence that ends in an apology I can accept." "I am sorry," she said, and for once it sounded almost real. "For all of it, including how I treated Elena. She didn't deserve any of that. It wasn't redemption, nothing could undo what she'd done, but it was, at least, an acknowledgement, witnessed by lawyers and recorded for the public record that would follow her name from then on. The apology would mean little legally, but it meant something to Daniel, a small closing of a door he needed shut. That evening the house felt different, lighter somehow despite everything. Daniel found Elena in the kitchen, as he so often did, with Maya drawing quietly at the small table. "I want to show you something," Daniel said, setting the old paperwork in front of her. Elena read it slowly, her eyes widening as the implications became clear. A stake in the company, decades of unpaid debt, a connection to a family she'd never known mattered. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "I never came here looking for anything like this." "I know," Daniel said. "That's exactly why I trust it." Over the following weeks, lawyers worked to formalize what the old documents had revealed, and Elena found herself, almost overnight, transformed from employee to stakeholder, not handed charity, but finally given what had been owed to her family for 30 years. She insisted on continuing to work, at least for a while. Unable to imagine simply walking away from the life she'd built, however humble it had been. Daniel, for his part, found himself looking forward to mornings in a way he hadn't in years, not because of any grand declaration, but because of small things. Maya running to greet him at the door. Elena's quiet laugh when he finally cracked a joke that landed. The slow, patient rebuilding of trust between two people who had both been hurt and had both, somehow, survived it. One evening, while sorting through old family records to settle the estate properly, Elena found something tucked into the back of her father's old construction ledger. A photograph, yellowed with age, of her mother as a young woman standing beside a man Elena didn't immediately recognize. She turned it over. On the back, in faded handwriting, were 3 words. "Forgive me. W." She showed it to Daniel that night, both of them studying the photograph under the kitchen light. "That's not your father in this picture," Daniel said slowly, something flickering behind his eyes. I think that might be my grandfather." Neither of them said anything more. But the question hung in the air between them, warm and unresolved, the beginning of a mystery neither was ready to chase yet, but one that would someday ask to be answered. For now, it was enough to sit together in that kitchen, in a house that finally felt like a home again, while Maya's small voice carried in from the next room, humming some tuneless little song, blissfully unaware that her 3 words beneath a dinner table had changed the course of so many lives. Sometimes the people the world overlooks, a tired housekeeper, a small child playing under a table, are the ones who end up protecting us the most. Truth doesn't always arrive through proof or power. Sometimes it arrives through innocence, simply because a child was too young to know how to lie. If this story touched you the way it touched us while writing it, please hit that like button. It truly helps this channel grow. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next emotional story waiting for you. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Daniel's place at that table? Share this video with someone who believes in second chances and quiet justice. And if Maya's 3 little words gave you chills, let us know below. Thank you for spending this time with us, friends. Until next time, take care of each other.